I don't think you need BTQ. So here comes BTQ. It's a company that has put, let me just get this straight here. The whole company, since they started the company, $41 million has gone into it. The company, has spent, I think since it existed, maybe 5 million in R&D, maybe. So
that number is probably stale.
maybe
just given what I
10.
know. But yeah, I mean, well, looping back to your points, just so you can comment on it real quick.
Yeah.
Couldn't agree more with kind of how you laid that out. I think part of what I wanted to relay as it relates to BTQ vis-a-vis, the Rigettis, INQs, et cetera, of the world is.
Well, I don't compare them against anybody else, right? I mean, that's not my job.
Right. And I know this might be more for others who are comparing them, less so.
Well, I wouldn't encourage them to compare it either. It's just a company, right? Our job's to. Our job's to value the company. What does the company
Top
have?
news alert: Putin-Trump
Exactly.
summit
It has
on
nothing to
hold
do with
after Russia rejects
E-Wave or
ceasefire.
anybody else.
Exactly. And I can tell you from my standpoint how I've been looking at valuing the company, at least.
Well, I thought you were going to talk about what I talked about.
No. Yeah, I am. Relating to that, the Bitcoin, like the quantum-resistant Bitcoin transition to me is much more of a call option on this story. Not something that I actually view. I actually similarly view it as you. There's no way that I can, tangibly give anyone a date where that situation occurs. But I can tell you that the company itself, like the actual revenue generation that we will see with the company is not going to stem from Bitcoin Quantum. Nowhere in the next year to 2 years. Nothing material, at least. Where it will stem from is defense applications tied to CNSA 2.0 and the transition timelines that have been put forth there, which I think are actually tangible and being, driven by regulation. And then some of the stablecoin work that they're doing, which again is actually tangible. But long story short, I do agree with a lot of the technicalities you put forth, and I think it's really wise to think through those. I just think it's maybe a little too soon to, call it a no-brainer short when I do believe we will see some pretty impressive contracts coming forth that, you're not getting out of the likes of the rest of the quantum ecosystem today, and you won't be for quite some time.
Well, let's unpack that a little bit. So the company hasn't generated any revenue yet.
Right. It's been in full like IP and R&D mode, and a lot of new hire. As you know, there's not a ton of talent pool that's actually qualified in the space.
Well,
it's a very small community talent, so they've been focusing on hiring the right talent.
Yeah.
Which I believe they have. To the extent you think of neutral cold atom versus other approaches one way or another, I don't know, but I think they've kind of honed in on the right talent. And the applications that they're going after and the verticals they're going after have, at least to me, tangible tailwinds stemming from regulatory action.
Okay.
Or at least guidelines.
Yeah, so let's get into that a little bit. So looking at 2024, they spent around $2.5 million on R&D.
That's right.
And I run a little software company, and I think we spent as much. And it's on different stuff, of course, but like you can't do too much with a few $1 million. And it's pretty hard to create $1 billion company with a few $1 million of work. And I'm familiar with like post-quantum cryptography, for example. And obviously these guys aren't making a quantum computer. They're not telling you they're making a quantum computer. It has nothing to do with that. But if the idea is that these guys are going to help other companies transition to PQC, well, that to me isn't really a business. That's a one-time consulting fee. that's not really something that many people need to, you know, hire anybody for, quite frankly. But if you are going to hire somebody, I think you go to Accenture or, you know,
Well,
Cloudflare
it's not,
or
yeah,
IBM.
just to add clarity to that, it's less so on a advisory basis. So at least on as it relates to stablecoins, for example, that would be more on a transaction basis.
Okay.
So think basis points on that.
Well,
As it
well,
relates to defense applications,
well.
it would be
Let's go.
integration with specific, hardware and chips that they've developed.
Well, let's go. Let's
Collaboration with
go.
Foxconn.
Well, let's try to go one by one. So, on stablecoin, everyone wants to build a stablecoin. I don't think they're going to be able to build a stablecoin business. It's not easy.
They're not building the stablecoin. But yeah, continue.
What are they going to do?
They're providing the settlement network, which would be quantum proofed.
Okay. So, like, to me, quantum proof, quote unquote, technology is widely and freely available, and like thousands of companies have used it, right? Like, nobody needs them to do anything. And then making new crypto, to me, that sounds really bearish. Like, it's very hard to make new crypto. And Tether and USDC, Circle, they can do quantum algorithms. I mean, it's not too much work. I think maybe they're one of the ways they've had a successful stock price, obviously no business yet, because you could help people PQC today. So I don't see why they don't have revenue now and what's going to change, because PQC has been around a while. Like, there's been a ton of work for that. So, like, to me, these are just a bunch of startup ideas. Like, it's not worth $1 billion. Like, if somebody came to me and said, Martin, I want to make a stablecoin network, I say, cool, man. You're doing a pre-seed. You don't have much work yet done. A couple million maybe you spent. Maybe you're doing a seed. What's the valuation? If they said if they said $1 billion, I would slap them in the face. If they said 10 million, 20 million, I'd say, okay, I'll kick in $1 million. But, like, this is a company valued at a price that's, not a seed round. It's valued at a Series A round, Series B round. And, it doesn't strike me that this is proprietary technology that's useful, because the point of Kyber and dilithium and post-quantum, algorithms is that they're open source and that they're available to anybody and they should be easy to implement. And I think that the packages that are out there have made that happen. And the whole point is that you don't need new hardware, that everything's, going from RSA to Kyber is like, just switching some code around. But again, I'm very open-minded. You know the story better than I do.
I actually like a lot of what you're saying, because to me, you've actually listed a lot of the call optionality to the story. Where I've focused a lot of my attention, quite frankly, on this story is tied to work that they're doing on the defense side. So they are in discussions with I'll just say a large defense contractor in the UAE. And, that revenue itself, I think, should we see it in the next 6 to 12 months start coming in, I think it might actually change your viewpoint on the story. So
what technology do they have that's useful?
So they've been working in the background with Foxconn on developing, a specific chip and kind of hardware infrastructure for defense. And that somewhat goes along the lines of, I wouldn't say the stuff they're doing for CNSA 2.0, but it kind of does parallel some of that, at least as it relates to the equipment side of the mandate. Theoretically, they've got it to phasing in by around 2030 to 2033. That aside, I think the work that they are doing with the defense contractor in the UAE, to me at least, seems promising. At least in my channel checks, it does seem promising.
Can we just take a step back and what is the technology? What is it useful for? Like, why is it something somebody wants?
Right. So it's basically, without getting into too much detail because I'd like them to on their end. I know that they're waiting to. But the technology itself is essentially prevents any sort of hacking threat into the defense systems, like critical defense systems. And so a lot of the new age defense systems that the UAE is spending on, they're trying to proactively think ahead and have that technology embedded within.
It sounds a little vague to me. I mean, there's a lot to it. I don't really hear how they could spend a few $1,000,000 and have something anybody wants. Like usually you have to have like this.
No, this will definitely take more capital, but it's not a immediate sort of capital infusion. Like they have raised a few times, they have enough capital on hand to start delivering kind of early orders, and then from there, the plan will definitely be to raise additional capital.
How much cash do they? How much cash do they have now?
They should have about 40 million.
Okay,
40 million plus.
Do they do a placement or something?
Yeah, that's right.
I see they have 10 on the last December 24. So they raised
And then
30 or 40 or 50.
Yeah, that's correct. There was two other placements since then.
Do you know how many people work there?
Yeah, so the team at BTQ, which why I like it much more than the other PQC kind of small names out there, it's about like 30 to 40 people large right now, which, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, from my understanding, that is actually a pretty decently sized team.
I don't know, for a publicly traded company, that's that's about as
Not from the standpoint of a publicly traded company, but from the standpoint of people that are actually, focused on quantum, and actually have expertise in quantum.
This isn't really quantum, right? I mean,
So there are quantum aspects to it. So I just didn't really need to get into, but happy to. So they have a stake in a neutral called Atom Play out of France called QPerfect, which they also have the ability to acquire in full. I believe by April, if I'm not mistaken, April of 26. And that company is working on quantum. And so they also have kind of brought in-house one of the kind of thought leaders in neutral atom quantum computing, Dr. Brennan. Comes from Macquarie University over there. So they do have a lot of people that actually have quantum expertise, but I hear your point.
yeah. So you're going to launch a stablecoin, or somebody's going to launch a stablecoin with them in partnership?
That has happened. That should kick off in November, I believe.
Do we know the name of this stablecoin?
We do know the I guess the owner of it, if you will. That's Donald. And then they are also working with Finger Technology out of Korea. So those are the two Korean players that they've publicly come out and discussed working with. I think the stablecoin, if I'm not mistaken, should launch either mid-November or end of November, around that timeline. So call it the next month or two, month and a half rather.
Okay, so
that's on the stablecoin side.
So for a stablecoin, people really like stablecoins because you can send somebody money very easily, like USDC. If you have a wallet like Phantom or MetaMask or whatever, I could send you $5,000, really simple, no problems. Here, I guess, like I would have to, because this isn't over Ethereum, this isn't over one of the known crypto networks, like it's its own crypto network. So I would have to get this stablecoin somehow via other crypto, if that makes sense. Like all the other stablecoins run over a well-known network like an Ethereum mostly, but also a Solana. And because people use those things on Coinbase and Kraken, whatever, you can use the USDC or USDT. Most people use them to like trade between Ethereum, and then occasionally they use them to trade into back to fiat. So like, if I have $1 million of crypto right now, why use this stablecoin?
I hear what you're saying. Yeah, I'm here. I'm listening.
Yeah.
Just didn't know if you were done asking.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, it's a good point. I think it's the fact that Donald, at least in Korea, does have reach to millions of users across its various channels, whether that's e-commerce, gaming, retail, etc. So they're kind of enabling their embedded user base to transact in stablecoin. So, but I hear exactly what you're saying. It's not like it won't be a lift per se, but I think it is a unique approach. I'll give them that.
Yeah, I'd be prepared to pay for it if they launched it and got some AUM. You know, that's the hardest thing to do in crypto. Everyone wants to make a stablecoin. Everyone has different angles. Like some people want to make stablecoins by giving back the yield that the company keeps. Like Tether and Circle are really valuable because they keep the yield of the deposits. And
Right.
you keep the dollar, but you don't get the yield, which is basically the depreciation of the base. So, it's kind of there's a lot of people out there trying to make a stablecoin, but the key, I think, to most of these stablecoins is they run on a network that's well known. Anybody can start.
So yeah. So just to add clarity, it's not as if Donald is launching a new stablecoin. They already have one that is transacted on daily. It's just that they are quantum proofing it for Donald, and so that was the agreement that was discussed, I guess, last month. That coin itself, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it was called Paycoin. If I'm not mistaken, I'll have to double check on that. But just to round that out, it's not that Donald or Finger Technologies are launching a brand new stablecoin. They actually have, I guess, crypto in this case that is already transacted.
Okay.
And what BTQ is value prop or the economics of it, which I think we'll learn a lot more about come mid-November or end of November, whenever it officially goes live, is what sort of take rate they're getting, like what bit rate they're getting on each transaction. But that would be the economics of at least the QSSN that they have launched. Now each will obviously come with their own flavor, largely tied to exactly what you're saying. Whether it's a brand new stablecoin, existing stablecoin, a different cryptocurrency altogether. But yeah, just wanted to add clarity to that point.
Yeah, I'm trying to look a little bit into Denal. It's a pretty small company. It's like a micro cap. So I don't get too excited about Denal is smaller market cap than BTQ.
Agreed. Yeah.
So
And it's at least in my opinion, it'll just be one of the earlier adopters. But we'll see. Again, I think to me these are somewhat maybe not call options, maybe that's the wrong word, but they're kind of kickers to the story, if you will.
I guess the main part is
the defense part to me is where like a lot of the actual tangible larger revenue streams could come into play a lot sooner than a lot of people are thinking.
let's just focus on that then. I think I have a PowerPoint of theirs. investor deck. We'll kind of look at that real quick. Accelerating quantum advantage is their kind of big headline. First company to achieve quantum advantage is what they said. That seems like a false statement. They also say outperform deca-billion-dollar competitors with minimal funding. Okay, that seems again kind of a little rich, but I see quantum hardware, boson samplers. They misspell neutral atom quantum processor in this PowerPoint, but I assume they mean neutral here. And PQC, secure chip elements, QSIM. Okay, so I'm just scanning through here. QSIM is the first crypto agile secure element. QSIM is quantum compute memory, security hardened processor designed to run any cryptographic algorithm using state-of-the-art chip designs. I'm not a hardware expert, but I do know a little bit about this. They show a QSIM test chip inside a 65 nanometer TSMC node. If you know much about chips, that's a very, 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 very old
Right, yeah, older
technology.
Yep.
And they're talking about, doing more there. They said their track record is they produce tens of millions of chips deployed within LG, but trying to figure out if they produce tens of millions of chips, where the revenue for those chips were, or trying to figure out if maybe that there's more to that partnership than maybe it's not. It doesn't hit the income statement, but it's something. So QSIM is positioned to make any chip compatible with PQC. I guess one question is, why do chips need to be compatible with PQC? But we can get to that in a second. I can imagine there's some instances where, like, if you try to snoop memory or other things like that, like typical hacking approaches, you want it encrypted, and you would want it quantum encrypted, but still don't know why you need hardware for that. It would seem to me like the same way you would encrypt operations that are in like a secure compute environment, like an SCE, you would be able to do that same security with dilithium. It's just a new algo, but it's the same idea of don't expose the internals. I know a little bit about programming, but not so much about this low level, really low level. I can ask some of my engineers here, but I think the general idea is you don't want to expose the contents of memory that can include passwords or locations of troops or something like that to an interloper, whether you capture the chip or you hack the chip. You don't want to be able to see what's actually inside the chip, and it could all be encrypted, potentially, and not really readable without decryption. I think that already exists. And moving that from RSA or ECC to PQC, I wouldn't imagine it would be, require a new hardware. I think it would just be new software, but I don't know. Maybe there's a way to make it work.
So to that, I would just point you, and not to totally hijack your call, I would love to, get into it more with you later.
Yeah.
Should that be something of interest?
Yeah.
Maybe connect you with the team there, so you can have your own take and hear it from them. But I would just direct you in the meantime to their acquisition of Radical Semiconductor. I think that should at least help guide maybe some of your avenues of research thereafter. I apologize for the background.
No, that's okay. I just had a kid myself.
Yeah. But yeah, I would just point you to the Radical Semiconductor acquisition from last year. The team has now actually come on board fully, but that is, I think that's something that should at least answer some of those thoughts that are percolating.
Yeah, I'll take a look at that. I mean, the last thing I'd just say is that, I feel like this is more of a business plan than a company. obviously the two are not that distinguishable in the early stage, right? But like
Correct.
having done a lot of startups myself, I get it. But I also don't start a startup and then tell people, like, I have a lot of revenue now at my startup, at least compared to BTQ. And I try not to ask for $1 billion valuation until I have, like 200 million in revenue or 100 million in revenue, which I don't have quite yet. But to me, like, it just like, it's too early to merit this number. Like, I'm not saying that the world doesn't need PQC, or that everyone's going to do PQC with the button press and doesn't need BTQ. Some people are going to need help. Some people might even need hardware, to your point. But like, that's a business that's yet to be exist and could exist at some point. But like, I'd rather invest in venture stage stuff that, the comparable of like $1 billion startups. Like, there are I have a list of $1 billion startups I can buy shares in. I'm happy to share it with you. And I would challenge you to say that this is the best opportunity out of, I mean, I can read you some of the companies real quick that are the same valuation.
Totally believe you, and I have a list as well. And trust me, I get where you're coming from.
Yeah, there's some decent opportunities. There's Docker.
Definitely some decent opportunities.
Quora is like the relatively well-known website that's around the same valuation. Like there's companies that are, got a lot of revenue. Patreon is another one. It's kind of like an OnlyFans style company. There are businesses that, seem like they might have better prospects, or they've built like something of value that are worth they're worth less or just around the same amount as BTQ. So to me, like if they can actually generate, 100 in revenue, absolutely it'd be worth $1 billion. But like if you've done the startup thing like I have, getting from 0 to 1 is really freaking hard.
Yeah, no, and I wouldn't disparage anyone who has tried. Like it's extremely difficult, 0 to 1. Totally agree with you. But I think at least from my standpoint, I do believe there is some meat on the bone here. I wouldn't be as heavily invested if I didn't believe that.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah.
But I do think it's worth at least keeping eyes on, because I do think over the course of the next 12 months, you should start to see a revenue ramp that actually gets you thinking. And I might be way too early to this, and I've been way too early in the past. Just as well as any other professional investor, being early is just as good as being wrong in certain instances.
Yep.
So, and I'm not gonna opine that I know I'm 100% right here. I don't.
No,
what I do know is that they are actually doing something tangible that isn't subject to Moore's law situation, that isn't subject to getting to 1 million qubits or 2 million qubits or whatever it might actually be. And so to me, that being a lighter capex model, number one, to me is tantamount. Because I couldn't tell you which quantum approach is ultimately the most successful approach, whether it's 3, 5, 10 years down the line or more. But a company that at least has a business plan in place, that actually has contracts that are on the come, some that have already kind of been negotiated and set to go live in the coming months, that to me at least has a lot more intrigue as it relates to the theme overall.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't really believe in thematic investing. Like, I just look at each company individually, so I don't really care about all that. But I want to stay in touch and talk about the nitty gritty of the technology and all that, because I
would love to.
It's kind of an opaque company in a way. Like they,
It is very. It has been very much kind of stealth operating, stealth R&D. And so, it's kind of just made it on to the map. And frankly, you've probably added more, I guess, eyeballs to the story.
Yeah.
Than it existed at any point since I've owned it.
Well, that
So,
guy,
thank you for that.
the only reason I know about it is that guy Eric Jackson, and you know, it's kind of in this quantum sphere. So, you know, to me, you know, it kind of made more sense when it was $1 or something, because it was like that's the startup nature of a company like that. And then like you get to the billion territory, like, you know, I've been there with a startup. It's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, and it's not easy. But let's stay in touch, and thank you so much everyone for listening. Catch you tomorrow for another thrilling trading session. See you later. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's good to meet people. I'm heavily short. I'm heavily short. He's heavily long, and like, it's good to just have a healthy conversation like that. Okay, time maybe to go. Might have to cut the stream. Yeah, let me see you guys tomorrow. Okay.